how to feel good on Mondays. Mandy and I are going to dive into a couple of things that we do in the weekend or try to do most weekends in order to rock and roll come Monday. I think this is a nice little summary of just some of those subtle little habits that we've built up over time that we allow ourselves that time, that feel good factor to set ourselves up for the week. And the many different ways that we've talked about anchoring in a couple of habits and steps to make sure that we're good so that we can show up as our best. For Mandy and I, that's pretty relevant. We talk to a lot of people in our week. We've always got to be on. We're presenting in some form every single week. So we don't have an off week. We might have an off day, but we just want to certainly be on track. So these are a couple of things that we want to talk through, and I'd love to get an idea of what yours are first, Mandy, but it'll also allow you guys to have a think about what things do you put in your weekend? Is there any time for you, or are you just running from kid event to kid event, or are you, cramming the weekend full of activities, but no real downtime to set you up for the week? And I've noticed that plenty of times for myself as well, where you'll go away on a weekend, you don't get back until 8 p.m. on Sunday night, and you're absolutely exhausted Monday morning. So what was supposed to be a weekend away turns into kind of draining you for the rest of the week, and you can't wait till the following weekend just to catch up, right? So we all have weekends away. We always have stuff on, but what are the things that we kind of try anchor in regardless? All right. So Mandy, I'll get you a start. What's a one or two there that feel like a key one that you'll use regardless of whether you're away for the weekend or whether you're at home?
Yeah, well, this one I did learn from you, Ollie. So, and I know you do this too, but is the time blocking on a Sunday evening. Sometimes I do it earlier in the day, but generally it is sort of towards, that later not late in the evening, but in the evening on a Sunday. And what I do is I kind of allow myself around 30 minutes to 45 minutes or whatever to just spend some time with what are the big things that I want to exactly the journal, the body reset journal is what I use. But it's spending some time with it more than anything. It's not just quickly writing it down and getting it done. It's actually spending some time with what are the key things you want to achieve this week? Where do they fit? What are the things that you're going to make sure that happen regardless? This is like the non-negotiables, right? Like training, food prep, those sorts of things. And really narrowing down those big to-do lists into a couple of key things of not these are to do, but these will be done. And man, it's so interesting. I've always resisted, in a way, things like budgeting or planning forward, those sorts of things, because I want to be spontaneous. But it's amazing how much of a waste of energy and a waste of time being spontaneous is when you actually look back on it and you're like, well, I just did nothing because I wanted to be spontaneous. Where when you take 40 minutes at the start of a week on a Sunday to get clear on what the goals for the week are, whether it's in relation to your work or your health or kids or family or whatever it is, how much, one, better you sleep on a Sunday night because you don't go into Monday dreading what's going to come because you know what's coming. But how much more efficient and kind of just mentally free you are going into the week knowing Monday, this is the focus. Tuesday, this is what I'm doing. And I know that all the things that need to fit. It's every time I do it, I'm like, why have I not done this for the last 15 years?
And I think we've battle tested that in enough places now, right? Like I've tried it with the creative, the artist, the writer. I've tried it with the guy who's just sold his business and doesn't know how to set up his day, but wants a bit of freedom. I've set it up on my own holidays, right? You're setting up those little bumpers in your day that you're not removing spontaneity, but you are removing the wasting all the morning waiting for a thing to happen. And I
Yes.
think if you can create those bumpers, to kind of start and end your day in a way that you're feeling productive or something has been complete or that you're just priming your body to have a good day. I think that's really, really helpful. But what you've clarified there with the to do to the get done is we've seen it happen in lots of different ways with clients, but I fundamentally love the concept of this is all the stuff I think I want to do. What things are actually going to get done this week and where in my week do they fit, right? And I think that's the second and third order consequences that most of us don't look at. And, before I had this process, I had, as much as you had, a massive long list of things to get round to. And if you're listening to this, we've got a couple of things we can chew on there, even as we've implemented in the last 6 months, Mandy, the to-do list for the week, the to-do list for the month, and then just the brain dump of things I can get to when I've finally got capacity, right? I've really enjoyed that addition. But the game of Tetris, right? Like it's sitting down on that Sunday night, this is the thing I need to do. It's going to take about 2 hours. Okay, where in my week have I got 2 hours? I've got no time, so I'm going to have to do some reshuffling. And I'm really glad I'm doing that on Sunday night rather than getting halfway through Wednesday and wondering why I'm still spinning my wheels. So I
Mm.
think that general strategic, proactive nature of where's the stuff actually fit in my week, you'll be surprised how many industries this fits in. So don't put up the blanket, this won't work in my industry or my role, because I promise you, I've seen some pretty creative ways of this coming in cameramen that are on the ground with movies, like the stuff that you'd think is so volatile that you'd never plan. I've
Mm.
seen it work, right? So playing that game of Tetris, getting an idea of where it anchors into your week, I think it's a really nice way, and certainly one for me as well. I wrote down planning for my week. Wrote down the time blocking. It's fundamentally the same thing as I'm looking at all the stuff, I'm moving it and translating it to how can I actually fit it into my week, and then there's an actual visual of some form as well. Do you go full color coding there, or what's that kind of final? What's your final step to be like, cool, I'm actually ready for my week here?
Yeah, I first take everything that's already booked in and put that into my journal, and then I see where the gaps are, like what are the times left over, and what is on the list of things that I need to focus on and get done this week. Where do they fit? And then I block them into my Google Calendar, so you kind of go from one to the other. And I think the important thing there as well is I also include in that things like a workout and whatnot. And this is what I've seen work for me and for clients that have done this is that if on a Sunday, most people know for a general kind of overview of what the week's going to look like. There's going to be some curveballs depending on if you're, say, on the road or something like that. But as a general rule, you sort of know mostly where you're going to be on most days. And so being attached to the outcome rather than attached to the process is really important here because it might be that you typically work out at this time on a Wednesday morning, and this week it's not going to work because you're on the road and you know that on a Sunday night. So you have the opportunity to move it at that point and put it somewhere else in your week. And you still achieve the outcome, but the way you got there was different. Whereas if you just allow that to happen, you get to Wednesday and you're like, oh, no time to do my normal workout. So it just doesn't happen. Whereas you probably knew and you could have planned that in the first place. And well, at least that's how I find it for myself. Just being able to be not so committed to exactly what it looks like each week, but actually committed to the fact that the important things happen each week, regardless.
Yeah, I think for you that's probably a little bit more relevant than for me, but I agree with it just as strongly. The reason I say that is just that for my workouts, me and my wife, obviously, I drop her off. I used to drop her off in the morning, then go work out. We now actually work out together. But either way, it's always just being like blocked in at that time, like 7:30. We're there every day, at least 4 days of the week anyway. Um, so I know that for myself, I'm kind of one of the people that once I get into something, I kind of need a couple hours to focus. I don't like having to break that cycle.
Mm,
And if I do break that cycle, I'm usually pretty mentally tired that going for a walk is a much better use of time than trying to
mm,
focus in a workout. That's just what I've found for me. So um, for the most part, I'll always get that workout done in the morning. So any sort of shifting is just slightly earlier, slightly later, if that's if and around flights, whatever, but I'm still working out in the morning. Uh, in your case, obviously, you've got two workouts or so that you do in the morning, two that you're kind of doing after picking up kids and things, right? So there's a
mm,
bit more volatility there and more opportunity for that to
mm.
be missed or skipped for a couple of days if not planned.
Yeah, I think, and this is getting more and more, I guess my viewpoint as I get up, well, not as I get older, but as my kids get older, I guess I'm
Both
getting
happen at the
older.
same time.
We're ignoring that piece. The kids are
Yeah.
getting older, not me. Um, as they're getting older and they're not obviously at a drop, they can't drive themselves places yet, but they have need to go places. And yeah, I'm the taxi driver. So just with those sorts of juggles, being less committed to exactly when it is but knowing that it will happen regardless has been quite an important mindset shift for me. And even seasonally changing that round, just depending on what the days look like. But I think, like, just having talked to a lot of clients about this, I would say there'd be people that fall into this as well, even if kids aren't in the picture, like people that are like sales reps that might be on the road quite a lot, or people that travel a lot for work, or people that maybe have varying seasonality of work, like farmers with calving and stuff like that. If you are too committed to exactly when the thing happens and I can't do a walk unless it's at this time in the morning, then we're going to run into some roadblocks eventually, which will trip you up. So it's kind of nice to hold it. You can be committed to it, absolutely, but hold it a little bit loosely
Hmm.
uh, so that it can shift and move and be flexible with your lifestyle if need be.
Yeah, cool. So both of us pretty agreed with that on step one. There's some form of planning. Some days it might be 15 minutes, sometimes it might be a good 45-minute chunk, but it's just that give yourself that space and time in order to plan out the week and just ask yourself, what does this look like? And I think
Mm.
the second part that you kind of alluded to there as well is it's all on one calendar, right? You don't have one calendar with picking up kids and workouts and one calendar with work. They have to be the same calendar because they're one of you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental shift for many people is, oh, I don't want to put this stuff in my work calendar. I'm like, you don't have to call it, going to get Botox. You can just say appointment, right? I
Yeah, yeah,
don't know
yeah.
why that came up, but being able to kind of have those blocks in there and have those visual things, whether it's you've written what it is or visual of the color that it is, it just allows you to make sure it's a prompt to fit you back in. And I think that's important. Um, one of the things that one of our mindset coaches said for a long time is, look, the things in my calendar for me are red because unless there's blood, they don't move. And then there's the blue, and then there's green, and there's all these other things, whatever they mean. But
Mm.
it was a really nice kind of prioritization of order of what that next thing was. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
The second one, I think we kind of had, again, kind of similar in some regard here. But if we do the planning, we're ready for the week. Now, what's something for you, like actually in the weekend?
Yeah, so that's another thing that always goes into my weekend would be and I actually have this conversation with myself because if you're someone is who kind of has that your value is attached to your output, it's sometimes hard to do something where you're just switching off and doing something for fun. So I do have this conversation of if there was nothing else going on right now, what would I choose to do? What do I actually want to do in this moment? So I always put something in the weekend, which is just something that I've chosen to do. And it does vary. Usually it's activity based. Sometimes it's an adventure based, sometimes it's quite spontaneous, and my husband rolls his eyes and he's like, "Oh, here we go again."
The
But
Mandy activity. Yep.
yeah. The curveball, we're going up a mountain.
Yeah.
Um, but I always put in something, and I feel like it doesn't even have to be very big. But psychologically, it makes a really big difference to me to know that at the end of the week, you've done the things you need to do, you're organized, and you've also just done something that just kind of lights your fire and makes you feel good.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know why it makes such a big difference, but it really, really does.
Yeah, well, it's that sort of. I like to get to the end of any day and feel like there's something that's being produced or there's been something that's been created or completed, and
Mm,
I think all of us can probably kind of resonate with that. One thing that I
mm,
want to kind of pick out of what you just said there, though, which we've had a big discussion on this morning as well, was what do I want to do? And I think that's actually a bit of a muscle to be built. Certainly for a lot of the parents in the room, that if you've been running around after your kids, not to mention your work and probably every other obligation you've signed up to, what do I want to do is probably a very uncomfortable question because you don't know what that thing is, right? And
mm.
sometimes you might. I'd love to know if you get stuck, Mandy, here, and you go, what do I not want to have happen? And it's usually, well, I don't want to sit here and scroll and waste 3 hours, so I'm going to get up off my bum and go do something. But that question, I think there's some power in that as well. So, how long has that been around?
Yeah. Well, and it's a more recent one for me, and it is an uncomfortable one actually. Just that realization that you can go through your days and weeks and just be doing all good things, even things that you've chosen, right? But it's not necessarily something that if all of the guardrails were removed, you just choose to do for fun. You
Mm.
just choose to do as if in the mindset of the 18-year-old self-obsessed version of you would choose to do, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it is a tricky one because quite often you ask yourself and you don't know. And I've bumped into this quite a few times of what do I do when I'm not writing blood reports? I don't know. While I think about it, I'll write some more blood reports. Good
Yeah.
thing I like doing that. But yeah, it is a fun one to explore. And sometimes I think I've had this conversation with quite a few ladies actually in our mastery pods. Actually, just this month, we've talked about one of the questions I asked them was what were some of the drivers and values and motivators that you had when you were 20 that maybe look a little different now. And it was a real interesting discussion just looking back at like adventure or fun or these things that used to drive them or travel or whatever that they've just put on the back burner and don't do anymore. And we kind of think, oh, well, we're busy now, we can't travel, as if you have to go and do some long trip for it to count. Whereas maybe that travel, like little piece on a Saturday, could be achieved by just going somewhere we haven't been before, or going and doing a walk or something like that. But we don't do it because it seems too small and insignificant. but it actually still just it's just enough to be like, oh yeah, that was cool, that was different, that was something I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much in there. I think the activity, the time for you, and just the building the muscle of what do I want. I think is there's all sorts of stuff we could look at. For me, it's a little bit different. It might end up in the same activity in regards to a hike or that creative aspect. For me, the nuance here is that my rule or my focus is more like I need to sweat on the weekend, and it's twofold. First part is my weekends. Typically going to be less stressful or less, full on than during my week most of the time. So the weekend becomes a really nice way to kind of add that metabolic stress without it being too accumulative for the whole day that I'm worn out. So I do find that just both that time that I am able to kind of shift within the weekend is obviously a little bit more fluid, and I can be a little bit more creative in where that might look like. So it's usually more outdoors. It's usually on the mountain bike. It's usually something that I'm able to spend a bit more time exploring rather than I need to be back at X time. So I
Mm.
think there's a huge amount of improvement there. Even if it's tight for time, trying to get towards, the sauna or a quick hit session or something. I just typically there's a sweat in the weekend, and that's aerobically. I'm trying to look after obviously, there's all sorts of context I can give you here as a listener if you're not one of our clients in regards to managing total exercise volume. How much of that is weight training? Which most of those workouts, some of them you sweat, but it's not like a full like cardio or circuit space. So trying to still tick that box of perspiring enough in order to have both the sort of removal of toxin impact while also having them proven in aerobic and just general fitness and health there. I think
Yeah.
it's nice to add in. So usually like one of those are pretty much anchored in my weekend.
Mm.
So that's kind of a big one. But I do think that ties in because for me, I don't want that to be just stand on a treadmill and hate the activity I'm doing. I want the sweat to be something that is enjoyable, right? So I might be running around with my dog on the playground, or it might be mountain biking in many cases,
Mm.
uh, getting in a hike, getting in something there, so that there's a movement.
Yeah, yeah. I think I do a similar thing actually, but just in the context of where are you stacking that extra stressor?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to do, say, for example, a hit session or something more cardio based during the week, I would always put it on a day that is a little bit more free feeling
Mm.
rather than putting it on a hectic day, because otherwise you're just stacking hectic on hectic and you actually feel a bit crap from it.
Yep.
Even though the activity in and of itself was potentially good, it maybe wasn't good in that moment. So
Yeah.
I totally get that, being able to put it into your weekend when you've got a little bit more movement space of kind of mental energy and all of that. And then you get the full benefit of it, of you can
Yeah.
actually go hard with it, you can feel good from it. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm going to do any sort of cardio during the week, it's typically intervals and it's going to be less than 10 minutes, right? So very short and sharp, get it out of the way. Whereas the weekend, I can have a bit more space.
Yes. Yeah, nice.
Cool. So similar, you've got your time blocking, we've got and that activity for you, some sort of
Mm.
creative outlet, and then you've got the similar for me, I've got the planning the week and the sweat. The
Mhm.
final one, I think we're a little bit different on, but I think it actually ironically leads to the same outcome. So what was your third one?
The third one I hate a little bit, but it's also important, is making sure that, like, psychologically or in my space, I feel organized. So this is usually things like housework, boring, but got to be done. It's not my strong suit. Um, Organizing kind of things like ordering groceries or just those things that take up a lot of your energy and space in the week. And if you can do them in a chunk of time that you've kind of dedicated to it, you get to go into your week feeling like you're actually on top of it all. And I think there is something rewarding in that too, especially when, I don't know about you, Ollie, but like a lot of our work is we get the creative aspect, but we've also got a lot of stuff that's just going on as well. And you can get to the end of the day and you're like, I know that I've done a lot. I'm not exactly sure entirely what it is yet. But there's something about the physicality of, say, clean the house up, vacuum the floor, do the dishes, those sorts of things where it's like you get that nice done something and it's really visual. So yeah, that's mine. That's probably a little bit of a quirk, to be fair, but it does really help in the sense that if your space is clear, your mental space is clear, and you tend to be able to show up more focused and more efficient. And then if you're more focused and more efficient in your work, you get to be able to switch off and be more, have better rest time as well.
Yeah, no, I do agree to a level. I think for me, there's two parts of that that I'll reinforce. It wasn't in my top three, but it definitely comes up is do I have enough food like cooked in the fridge, ready to rock. So it's not taking up a ton of space Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right?
Mm.
And I think, there's meals that we obviously cook fresh as we go, usually dinner. But so that lunches, for example, for most of us and probably most people listening too, is not necessarily a filler meal, but it's the one that's less fancy, right? Like it's just
Mm.
I'm hitting the fuel I need in order to perform for the day. I don't need it to be a Michelin star meal, right?
Yeah.
So that sort of stuff I just want to make sure on the Sunday is cooked and ready to rock. So I want to make sure there's a certain amount of cows slaughtered in order to make sure that they're ready to rock for the week. The cleaning of spaces I think actually comes up with like funny enough like all these little notepads around the place, right? Like I'm writing things on different notepads and just trying to consolidate. So it kind of
Mm.
links into the planning of the week, as there's an organizing of clothes, there's an organizing of to-do lists, so that I just whether in my head or in my space, there is a cleanliness, there's an order to things to a degree. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, that's for sure in there. The last one that I had on my list was more, and you kind of mentioned it on the activity front, but it's just purely creation. And this is more, we had a really good chat with our clients last month, or the start of this month, sorry, on the balance between creation and consumption. And I think that's
Mm.
something I'm just really mindful of in general, and want to make sure I don't get stuck down that rabbit hole of scrolling for hours. I think there's nothing worse than being like, I literally just lost 2 hours of my Sunday by just like getting stuck in the scroll. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, what that looks like is typically going to be uh, there's actually quite a lot of creation that I would do, throughout the week. So a big part of what we do is creation, so writing,
Mm.
creating videos, podcasts, etc. But in the weekend, I'll try to do it either one in a different space, or for example, if I'm writing a book or something, I'll make sure I get on a laptop and kind of throw myself on a couch in a corner, so it's a different space. Or
Mhm.
usually it's something outside. So if that literally becomes gardening, or that becomes something in the garage, something there that's physical, I think that really has its own benefit. And I think you are probably the same with this, but being mindful of the limitations of always being in front of a screen, right? There's so many things that we're able to access and improve and have a greater impact online, but being able to just have that component of in my physical space, how can I kind of step back and just make sure at least one day a week there's a check in on a real de-stimulus of total technology. I think is quite up there as well.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have. This shows up strongly for me in two ways. One is if I'm, say, sitting down having a coffee or something like that in the weekend, and I go to open my phone to scroll,
Mm.
I will catch myself, and instead I'll open Evernote and I'll write something.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
like, if I'm going to sit here and do nothing, write something. Doesn't
Yep.
matter what it is, right? But it's actually just transitioning that energy to be a product. Not, it's not that we always have to be productive either, but it's like do something that you then feel good about, that you've created, you've brought something into the world, you've actually put some use into it rather than just being a mindless consumer. And the other thing as well, and people will laugh at this being that I'm a chef and I have hardly any recipe books in the house because I don't read recipes, I make recipes. So if I'm going to like be creative, and usually that's when you've got that extra space, right? Get in the kitchen and cook something or make something or write a new recipe or try something out or and actually instead of consuming a recipe book, make some food and consume that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you and I listened to a podcast a little while ago in Bali that was all about watches, and it was really funny that I can't remember. It was like right in the early 1900s, right, where people were bored or in line, and they would pick up their pocket watch, right, and it was really funny for me because it was like, yeah, no, there's always been that tendency that like, oh, I'm standing still, I need to do something with myself, and now obviously everything's on your phone, so for the most part, that's become your phone, right? But there's always been that kind of that tick or that fidget nature in humans. And I think if you can create that transition to something, I'll use the word productive, but less so in like I need to create something and more of just like how I'm making the most of the moment I'm in, right? And I think if
Mhm.
you're gathering your thoughts, you're able to kind of use that brain power. You're just being mindful of that sort of active creation versus just passive disengagement, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's a quite a cool balance to catch yourself on,
Mhm.
because there's very easily half of most people's weekends are just TV or social media, and I think that's why they feel tired on Monday. So
Mhm.
being able to short circuit that in some way, and the app one, that's kind of a cool way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but the when you are watching something, say, and I'm guessing with reels and stuff like that, it's probably even less than if you're actually watching a TV, a movie or something like that. But your brain is less active in that moment than if you were doing nothing and just thinking,
Mm,
because you're literally being fed information rather than actually your brain working through processes.
yeah.
And how much, if we're just doing that all the time, is that just turning our brain to mush? Like our brain's just getting lazy. It is a muscle and it gets stronger doing the things we do more of. And if we're just doing this scenario, this vegging out, just being stuffed information all the time or content that really doesn't actually fundamentally change our life, how much are we just actually destroying the capacity of all the cool things that we could do?
Yeah, and if I look back at the list here, Mandy, I think all six of them, or three from both of us, they are all combating exactly that, right? Which is that it's so easy to just let life pass by for things to happen to us. And I think in most cases, what we're doing is those proactive little steps in order to make better use of our space, make that space to de-stimulus from stuff that's so easy to do. And in a
Mm.
lot of ways, it's many of these things require just that little bit more energy up front. Like everything, I think health-wise, is a little bit more energy up front for way more energy long term. And I think
Yeah.
that just yeah, the whole you and I have used this phrase plenty of times, but like the sort of active recovery versus passive disengagement. That's fundamentally what it is. Is if
Mhm.
you're the kind of person that can just give yourself that little nudge, that little compassion, like let's do something with today to make it worthwhile. You're going to notice that there's a level of momentum. And I think there's two very separate parts of society here where there's people just getting after it and being able to create and move forward and really hopefully be active in their life versus the ones that will just watch life go by and find things get harder and harder. And I think this is less about the lifting weights and eating protein. This is actually a
Mhm.
deeper discussion of, I'm a big fan of the first two, but big fan of also that space to allow that brain to really work, to think. And I
Mm.
think the many, many ways that humans avoid thinking is where a lot of that brain turning to mush really comes in. And I think, when we start to have that discussion around brain health and mental clarity, which we've talked about with our clients many times, I think it's very front of mind over 40, 50. Um, it's not just the supplement you take or the workout you do. It's notice those tendencies and those habits of how do I use my brain in this scenario to be a little bit more creative because we're in a microwave culture. Everything's super easy. We don't have to use our brain, but
Yeah.
it certainly makes it harder long term when we start forgetting things. We have to rely on stuff because it's just not sharp anymore.
Mm. Quite a nice filter here is the question that you asked on one of our mindset calls a couple of months ago is what is 2025 going to be remembered for?
Mm,
And I think if you ask yourself that when you look back on what made me 2025 to this point or whatever, are the key things that you remember of that things that happened to you or things that you chose to do? Because
yeah.
if they're things that happened to you, there was possibly a lack of intention there about what you were choosing to do. Not always. Sometimes life has curveballs, but as a general rule, like did you choose to do some things and actually achieve them? Or did you passively go through things just disengaging and letting things happen to you?
Oh, that's a lovely frame. All right, team, I'm gonna wrap this one up here. Hopefully that gives you a couple of things to think about. What are you doing for you in the weekend? Are you asking that question that Mandy said before, which was simply, what do I want to do today? Right? Is there just build that muscle back of actually that little spark, that little light, that little kid inside of you of like you're actually still doing something today for you because that whole, what made up your year is a summary of all those decisions along the way. And if you were just kind of thrown around like you were luggage in the back seat, then it's always going to feel like it's happening to you or at you. And I think if we're able to make those changes, the time blocking, the time or activity for you, and that clearing your space or some form of creation or active recovery, I think is a pretty cool way to look at it. And I think it's continued to be reinforced, probably stronger and stronger every time we talk about this. Um, because it makes our week way better. And that's why we keep doing it. So adding that little bit of energy, regardless of if you're tired or not, we're so associated with how much better I feel afterwards or by the time I get around to Thursday, etc. Why would I stop doing it? So hopefully you can create the same structure or refine the one you currently have or simply reinforce that you're on the right path. Hopefully today was productive and we'll talk again soon.